Hi, everyone. Welcome to our channel, Phea. Douglas Macgregor has stated that it could be advantageous for others like him on the death list as the attention is diverted elsewhere. He asserts that if he remains present, he will undoubtedly address the matter. However, if he unexpectedly vanishes, it would serve as confirmation enough. Well, it seems evident that they don't share the same perspective. This appears to be a significant topic that warrants attention. There's a noticeable shift in the mood within Washington, particularly among key figures such as senators, House members, cabinet officials, the president, and vice president. It appears they are acknowledging that the situation is bleak and are contemplating ways to extend the conflict. While they publicly justify their actions as targeting Russia, it's clear that the intended harm hasn't materialized significantly. This tactic seems twofold. Firstly, they're provoking European nations, especially Germany, into actions that could be interpreted globally as acts war against Russia. The German government is now hesitant about supplying heavy military equipment to Ukraine, questioning whether they want to escalate their involvement and risk being seen as co-belligerents. Recent statements from officials like Mr. Collin, Assistant Secretary of Defense, imply a reluctance to provide certain military assets, cite concerns about maintenance and complexity. Well, yes, the agreement aligns with my perspective, albeit not for the same reasons as Mr. Carl stated. The issues with gas turbine engines have been recognized for decades, primarily due to their inefficiency in fuel consumption and susceptibility to debris, intake unsuitable for ground operations. These engines are designed for jet use at high altitudes, not for ground-based applications like tank propulsion. While historically high speeds may not have been a necessity for tanks, the M1 Abrams indeed faces numerous challenges. There's a concern that its deployment could lead to embarrassment due to performance shortcomings not related to the crew or weaponry, but the tank as a whole, as previously discussed. Now, to convince Germany to send tanks, President Biden proposed sending 10 M1s, to which Mr. Schultz responded with a tit-for-tat regarding Leopard tanks, illustrating a somewhat immature exchange. However, beneath this surface lies a more significant issue. Firstly, there's a lack of confidence in Ukraine's ability to prevail in the conflict, indicating a proxy war setback. Secondly, European nations lacking rapid military production capabilities are increasingly wary of escalating involvement. The extended lead times for crucial weapon systems like the AMRA missile highlight the logistical challenges in providing immediate support. While there's talk of supplying air defense systems like the Patriot to Ukraine, the inability to replenish munitions swiftly poses a significant concern. Unlike Russia, with its robust industrial capacity, both Europe and the United States lack the surge capability needed for sustained conflict. This realization underscores the gravity of the situation. Additionally, there's a growing awareness of historical parallels, with some historians highlighting past provocations by FDR leading up to Pearl Harbor, suggesting a similar danger of unintentionally escalating tensions. He asserts that the Japanese had the capability to attack and devastate Pearl Harbor. In the lead-up to the war, FDR initiated various actions, including the Column Memorandum, which instructed the Navy to provoke the Japanese by repeatedly violating their territorial waters with warships. Despite concerns about potential ship losses, FDR deemed them acceptable casualties. This decision, though incomprehensible by today's standards, ultimately led to the devastating attack. Furthermore, FDR deliberately stationed the fleet in Pearl Harbor instead of safer locations like San Diego or San Francisco, despite warnings from the Chief of Naval Operations about the vulnerability of such a position. Moreover, FDR was also involved in sending bombers to China and supporting the Flying Tigers to build up an air force capable of bombing Japan from Chinese territory in the years leading up to the war. These actions, often overlooked, bear resemblance to current events. He personally doesn't believe that President Biden shares similar intentions, suggesting that Biden may merely be following scripts provided to him. However, he acknowledges uncertainty about the true motivations of those behind Biden's decisions. Regarding the current situation in Ukraine, he expresses concerns about the impending collapse of Ukrainian defenses and questions what actions should be taken in response. He ponders whether a strategy involving the deployment of Polish, American, Romanian, and other forces to push into western Ukraine would be pursued, potentially escalating the confrontation. He concludes by suggesting that not only President Putin, but also a majority of Russians, may view the ongoing events through a lens shaped by past experiences and geopolitical realities. This term was coined by a former Marine major named Frank Hoffman, with the aim of justifying the involvement of Marine infantrymen in future insurgencies. It encompasses various elements such as ground troops, media manipulation, external influences, and game-changing weaponry, deviating from traditional notions of warfare involving conventional armies and air forces. Lavrov dismisses the concept of hybrid warfare, emphasizing the looming threat of high-end conventional warfare excluding nuclear weapons. He perceives such warfare as a strategic plan against Russia, given the extensive support provided to Ukraine, including information warfare aimed at vilifying Russia. The portrayal of Russia as a nationalist state rooted in Orthodox Christianity, defending its borders and identity, is seen as a precursor to its destruction in favor of a borderless and any-less society akin to Western Europe and the United States. Lavrov's stance underscores Russia's readiness to confront such aggression, contrasting with the unpreparedness of Western nations for all-out warfare. Moreover, it's evident that negotiations with Russia are unlikely, as they would imply acknowledgement of mistakes, an admission Washington is unwilling to make. There's a prevailing attitude of denial of failure within Washington, coupled with arrogance and a lack of understanding of the true implications of war, particularly among policymakers who lack military experience. Unlike previous generations of lawmakers who had first-hand experience with war, current officials seem detached from its grim reality and the catastrophic consequences it entails. He begins by addressing the judge, highlighting the misinformation surrounding Ukrainian casualties, which is increasingly difficult to ignore. Contrary to official reports, evidence suggests that around 122,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed in combat, with an additional 35,000 presumed dead or missing in action. Drawing parallels to World War II, he notes the significant number of casualties, particularly those who were never recovered. The majority of Ukrainian casualties result from artillery fire, including the use of thermobaric warheads which are devastating due to their ability to deprive an area of oxygen. He explains that the Russian military's extensive firepower, coupled with real-time surveillance and intelligence, gives them a considerable advantage over Ukrainian forces. This advantage is evident in the significant disparity in the number of rounds fired per day, with Russians firing up to 10 times more than Ukrainians. While acknowledging the difficulty in verifying information from Russian sources, reports suggest that Russian casualties range from 16,000 to 25,000 killed and possibly tens of thousands wounded. He attributes these casualties to the overwhelming firepower deployed by Russian forces. He expressed his concern over the lack of recognition of the dire situation by policymakers, cite disturbing comments about fighting a perpetual war against Russia if Ukraine has retreated to the Polish border. He suggests that there are influential figures advocating for continued conflict, including the presence of significant American and Polish military forces in the region. He mentions upcoming elections in Poland as a factor in considering the government's stance on the matter. He begins by referencing polling data across Europe, indicating a strong preference for a negotiated resolution to the conflict with Russia. There's little evidence suggesting any desire for war among European populations, with growing apprehension, particularly in Poland, about the potential consequences of further escalation. While acknowledging the existence of some individuals favoring conflict, he believes that most are hopeful of overcoming challenges, especially with regards to transitioning to alternative energy sources amid climate change concerns. However, he notes a prevailing sense of emotion surrounding the war, overshadowing rational decision-making. He discusses the rapid reinforcement of Ukrainian forces with new equipment facilitated by efficient production and delivery systems. Despite this, he argues that European nations never anticipated such a prolonged conflict and are now facing a critical shortage of resources, particularly precision munitions. This shortage is leading to reluctance among European NATO members to commit their armored units, prioritizing self-defense in the face of a potential fallout from the war. He mentions General Cavoli's significant influence in Europe and suggests that his remarks likely signal a recognition of the unsustainable nature of the current situation. While not explicitly stated, such statements would have undergone rigorous vetting within the White House and the Department of Defense. Regarding military strategy, he emphasizes the importance of accurate and